When my husband stood up at my 40th birthday party to announce he was divorcing me because I was financially worthless, he had no idea I had been secretly building a forensic accounting empire worth over $3 million. What he definitely didn't know was that I had just finished compiling evidence of his embezzlement schemes for the FBI, and his arrest warrant would be issued within 72 hours. The look on his face when I made that announcement in front of our 120 guests was absolutely priceless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The elegant ballroom at the Riverside Country Club had been transformed into what I thought would be a celebration of 4 decades of life and nearly 15 years of marriage. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across tables adorned with white roses and gold accents, while our closest friends and family members enjoyed the catered dinner that David had insisted on hosting, despite my preference for something more intimate. The irony was exquisite that he had chosen such a public venue for what would become the most humiliating moment of his life. I sat at the head table wearing the emerald green dress that David had complimented that morning, believing this would be an evening of joy and reflection on the life we had built together. The guests included colleagues from both our professions, neighbors from our upscale community, family members who had traveled considerable distances, and friends who had supported us through various challenges over the years. What none of them knew was that half the people in that room would become witnesses to the most dramatic reversal of fortune in recent memory. David had been unusually attentive throughout the evening, refilling my wine glass, making charming small talk with our guests, and playing the role of devoted husband with an enthusiasm that should have raised suspicions. His behavior felt performative in a way that seemed designed to establish his character before delivering devastating news. The speech he had prepared was clearly intended to position him as the reasonable party making a difficult but necessary decision about our marriage. When he stood to address the room, tapping his champagne flute with practiced confidence, the conversations gradually subsided as our guests turned their attention toward what they expected would be a loving tribute to our relationship and my personal milestone. David commanded attention naturally, his tall frame and distinguished silver hair conveying the authority that had made him successful in his corporate finance career. The smile he wore carried just enough warmth to seem genuine while concealing the calculated cruelty of what he was about to unleash. "Ladies and gentlemen," David began, his voice carrying clearly across the ballroom with the projection skills he had developed through years of boardroom presentations. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate Eleanor's 40th birthday. This milestone provides an opportunity not only to honor the past but to make important announcements about our future direction as individuals and as a family." The phrasing should have been my first warning. David was speaking about our marriage as if discussing a corporate restructuring, with the emotional detachment that characterized his approach to most personal relationships. Our guests listened with polite attention, expecting conventional birthday sentiments about love, partnership, and shared dreams for the years ahead. "Eleanor and I have shared many wonderful years together," David continued, his tone remaining conversational despite the gravity of what he was preparing to reveal. "However, we have reached a point where honesty requires acknowledging that our partnership has run its course. Our financial goals and lifestyle expectations have diverged in ways that cannot be reconciled through compromise or counseling." The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly as our guests began to sense that this speech was heading in an unexpected direction. Conversations at nearby tables stopped entirely as people strained to understand what David was actually communicating. The discomfort was palpable as friends and family members realized they were witnessing something far more personal and devastating than appropriate for a public celebration. Therefore, David announced with the finality of a judge delivering a verdict, "I am informing Eleanor tonight, in the presence of our community, that I will be filing for divorce next week. Our marriage has become financially and emotionally unsustainable, and continuing this charade would be unfair to both of us." The silence that followed was profound and terrible. 120 people sat frozen in their chairs, wine glasses suspended halfway to lips, forks paused over dinner plates, as they processed the unprecedented cruelty of what they had just witnessed. David had chosen my birthday celebration, surrounded by everyone we knew, to deliver news that should have been shared privately with compassion and respect. The humiliation was designed to be complete and public. David wanted witnesses to his announcement, perhaps believing that public disclosure would pressure me into accepting his terms without resistance. He had calculated that my embarrassment and social discomfort would make me compliant during divorce proceedings, willing to accept whatever settlement he proposed rather than endure additional public scrutiny of our failed marriage. What David had not calculated was how completely he had misunderstood both my financial situation and my professional capabilities. While he saw a woman who had spent recent years focused on part-time consulting work and community volunteer activities, the reality was far more complex and substantially more threatening to his carefully constructed plans. During the 18 months preceding this moment, I had been building Meridian Forensic Solutions, a specialized consulting practice that helped law enforcement agencies and corporate legal teams investigate financial crimes. My background in accounting and finance, combined with advanced training in forensic analysis techniques, had positioned me to serve a market that desperately needed sophisticated expertise in uncovering complex fraud schemes. The business had grown rapidly through referrals from satisfied clients who valued my ability to trace financial transactions through elaborate concealment mechanisms, identify patterns that revealed criminal intent, and present findings in formats that prosecutors could use effectively in court proceedings. What had begun as occasional consulting projects had evolved into a thriving practice that generated substantial revenues, while building my reputation as one of the region's most capable forensic accountants. More significantly, my latest client was the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the case I had been working on for the past 6 months involved investigating embezzlement schemes at mid-sized corporations throughout the metropolitan area. The evidence I had compiled painted a clear picture of systematic theft involving false vendor payments, manipulated expense reports, and offshore account transfers designed to conceal stolen funds from corporate oversight. The primary suspect in this investigation was David Mitchell Harrison, my husband of nearly 15 years, whose position as Chief Financial Officer at Hartwell Industries had provided him with the access and authority necessary to execute sophisticated theft schemes over an extended period. The irony was delicious that while David was planning to divorce me for being financially worthless, I was being paid handsomely by federal investigators to document his criminal activities. The evidence was overwhelming and indisputable. Bank records showed a pattern of unauthorized transfers from corporate accounts to shell companies that David controlled through nominees and false documentation. Expense reports revealed systematic inflation of costs for legitimate business activities, with the excess amounts diverted to personal accounts. Vendor payments had been manipulated to send money to fictitious companies that existed only to receive and launder stolen funds. The total amount of David's theft exceeded $2 million over a 4-year period, representing one of the largest corporate embezzlement cases in the region's recent history. The FBI had been preparing their case meticulously, gathering evidence that would ensure conviction while building a comprehensive understanding of how the schemes operated and who else might be involved. My role in this investigation had been particularly valuable because my intimate knowledge of David's financial habits and behavioral patterns provided insights that external investigators could never have accessed. I understood his travel schedules, his technology usage, his relationship with corporate vendors, and his approaches to financial planning in ways that allowed me to identify evidence that others might have overlooked. The arrest warrant had been signed that afternoon, just hours before our guests arrived at the country club, for what David believed would be his triumphant announcement of freedom from a burdensome marriage. Federal agents were prepared to execute the warrant within 72 hours, pending final coordination between the FBI field office and the United States Attorney's Office regarding the timing of related arrests and asset seizures. David's speech had been completed, but he remained standing at the head table, apparently expecting some response from me or our guests. The silence stretched uncomfortably as everyone waited to see how this unprecedented situation would resolve. Some guests looked toward the exits, clearly wanting to escape the awkwardness of witnessing such a private matter in a public setting. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze in the ballroom as I prepared to deliver information that would transform this moment from personal humiliation into public vindication. The emerald dress that David had complimented that morning suddenly felt like armor, protecting me as I prepared to reveal truths that would destroy his carefully constructed facade of respectability and success. "Thank you, David, for that announcement," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom with a steadiness that surprised even me. "Since we are sharing important news with our community tonight, I have an announcement of my own that our guests should hear." David's confident expression began to shift as he registered the calm authority in my voice. This was not the response he had anticipated from a woman he expected to be devastated by public rejection and financial insecurity. The subtle change in his demeanor suggested that he was beginning to recognize that this evening might not proceed according to his carefully orchestrated plan. "Over the past 18 months," I continued, "I have been building Meridian Forensic Solutions, a specialized consulting practice that helps investigate financial crimes for law enforcement agencies and corporate legal teams. Our clients include the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and we have been working on a particularly significant case involving corporate embezzlement." The confusion in David's eyes was beginning to transform into something approaching concern, as he started to understand that my announcement was connected to his own situation in ways he had not anticipated. Our guests remained silent, but their attention had shifted from sympathetic embarrassment on my behalf to curious anticipation of where this revelation was leading. "This case involves systematic theft from Hartwell Industries over a 4-year period, totaling over $2 million in stolen corporate funds," I explained, maintaining eye contact with David as his face began to drain of color. "The investigation has been completed, and federal authorities have identified the perpetrator through comprehensive analysis of bank records, expense reports, and vendor payments." The transformation in David's appearance was remarkable to witness. The confident man who had delivered his divorce announcement with theatrical flair was becoming someone who clearly understood that his world was about to collapse in ways he had never imagined possible. His hands began to tremble slightly as the implications of my words became clear. "The arrest warrant for David Mitchell Harrison was signed this afternoon," I announced, my voice carrying across the now completely silent ballroom. "Federal agents will execute that warrant within 72 hours. At which time he will be charged with multiple counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, and money laundering." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet that had greeted David's divorce announcement. This was the profound stillness that accompanies moments when reality shifts fundamentally and permanently. Our guests sat motionless, processing information that transformed their understanding of everything they thought they knew about our marriage, our financial situation, and the man who had just demanded a divorce from his financially worthless wife. David remained standing, his mouth slightly open, as he struggled to comprehend how completely his plans had been overturned. The evening that was supposed to establish his freedom and superiority had instead become the moment when his criminal activities were exposed to everyone whose opinion mattered to him. "So yes, David," I concluded, my voice carrying just enough satisfaction to convey how thoroughly I had enjoyed this reversal of fortune, "we should definitely discuss our future financial arrangements. I imagine your legal expenses will be quite substantial, and I doubt Hartwell Industries will be providing much severance pay to an embezzling executive." The devastation on his face was absolutely priceless, and worth every moment of the humiliation he had intended to inflict on me at my own birthday celebration. The morning after my birthday party disaster, I sat in my home office reviewing the comprehensive file that had consumed 18 months of my professional life, while my marriage slowly disintegrated around me. The federal investigation documents spread across my mahogany desk told a story of systematic betrayal that extended far beyond David's announcement the previous evening. Every bank statement, every fraudulent transaction, every carefully constructed lie represented not just criminal activity, but a profound violation of the trust I had placed in the man I had chosen to build a life with. What David could never have understood was that his criminal activities had inadvertently provided me with the motivation and opportunity to rebuild my career in ways that exceeded my previous professional achievements. While he was stealing millions from his employer and planning his dramatic exit from our marriage, I was developing expertise and building relationships that would establish me as one of the region's most sought-after forensic accounting specialists. The irony was exquisite in its completeness. David's embezzlement schemes had required sophisticated financial manipulations that drew the attention of federal investigators who needed specialized expertise to unravel the complex web of false transactions and hidden accounts. My background in corporate accounting, combined with my intimate knowledge of David's behavioral patterns and financial habits, had positioned me perfectly to serve as the primary consultant on a case that would ultimately destroy his freedom and reputation. The transformation from traditional accountant to forensic specialist had begun 3 years earlier, when I first noticed discrepancies in our personal financial statements that suggested David was concealing income sources from me. The irregularities were subtle but persistent, involving unexplained cash deposits, credit card payments for expenses I had not authorized, and investment account activity that David dismissed as routine portfolio management when I asked for explanations. My initial suspicions focused on the possibility that David was having an affair and spending money on another relationship. The financial evidence suggested someone with expensive tastes who required substantial financial support, though David's schedule and behavior showed no obvious signs of infidelity. His work demands had increased significantly over the previous 2 years, requiring longer hours and more frequent travel. But his explanations were plausible, and his apparent dedication to corporate responsibilities seemed genuine. The breakthrough came when I discovered that David had opened several business accounts using our home address, but registering them under company names I had never heard him mention. The accounts received regular deposits from Hartwell Industries, where David served as chief financial officer, but the amounts and timing suggested these were not legitimate business transactions related to his official responsibilities. Rather than confronting David directly about these discoveries, I made a decision that would prove crucial to both the federal investigation and my own professional development. I enrolled in an advanced forensic accounting certification program at the State University, ostensibly to enhance my consulting capabilities, but actually to acquire the specialized skills necessary to investigate David's activities systematically and professionally. The certification program introduced me to techniques for tracing complex financial transactions, identifying patterns that revealed criminal intent, and documenting evidence in formats that could withstand legal scrutiny. More importantly, the program connected me with law enforcement professionals who were struggling to find qualified consultants capable of handling sophisticated white-collar crime investigations. My first forensic consulting engagement came through a referral from one of my instructors, who recommended me to the district attorney's office for a case involving municipal fraud. The project required analyzing years of financial records to determine whether city contractors had been inflating invoices and sharing excess payments with corrupt officials. The work was challenging and detail-oriented, but I discovered that I possessed both the technical skills and psychological temperament necessary for forensic investigation. The success of that initial engagement led to additional referrals from prosecutors and law enforcement agencies who valued my ability to explain complex financial concepts in terms that juries could understand. My background in traditional accounting provided credibility with financial professionals, while my communication skills enabled me to present findings effectively in courtroom settings, where technical expertise had to be translated into compelling narrative evidence. Within 18 months, I had established Meridian Forensic Solutions as a legitimate consulting practice with a growing client base and a reputation for thoroughness and reliability. The business generated substantial revenues while providing professional satisfaction that had been absent from my previous accounting roles. More importantly, the work gave me access to investigative techniques and law enforcement contacts that would prove invaluable when I decided to report my suspicions about David's activities. The decision to contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation about David's embezzlement required careful consideration of both legal and personal implications. As his wife, I possessed intimate knowledge of his financial habits and access to information that external investigators could never obtain independently. However, cooperating with a federal investigation would essentially guarantee the destruction of our marriage and David's career, regardless of the ultimate legal outcomes. The moral calculation was straightforward, despite its personal complexity. David was stealing substantial amounts of money from his employer while maintaining a lifestyle that was funded partially through criminal activity. His victims included not only Hartwell Industries and its shareholders, but also employees whose job security depended on corporate financial stability that David was undermining through his theft. More personally, David's criminal activities had corrupted our entire relationship by introducing elements of deception and manipulation that made authentic partnership impossible. Every financial decision we made as a couple was influenced by David's hidden criminal income, while my own financial security was unknowingly dependent on stolen funds that could be seized by authorities at any time. My initial contact with the FBI was handled through an attorney who specialized in white-collar crime defense, ensuring that my cooperation would be protected through appropriate legal agreements while minimizing my personal exposure to potential charges related to David's activities. The Bureau's Financial Crimes Division was extremely interested in the information I could provide, particularly my access to David's personal financial records and my professional ability to analyze complex transaction patterns. The investigation that followed was comprehensive and methodical, involving analysis of years of corporate financial records, bank statements from multiple institutions, travel records that documented David's meetings with co-conspirators, and communication records that revealed the planning and coordination necessary for sophisticated embezzlement schemes. My role as consulting expert provided unique value because I could identify which of David's activities were genuinely unusual and potentially criminal, as opposed to routine financial management that might appear suspicious to investigators unfamiliar with his normal patterns. My intimate knowledge of his personality, habits, and decision-making processes allowed me to provide context that helped investigators understand the motivations and methods behind specific criminal activities. The evidence we uncovered revealed that David's embezzlement had been far more extensive and sophisticated than my initial discoveries had suggested. The false vendor payments, manipulated expense reports, and offshore account transfers represented only the most obvious elements of a comprehensive theft operation that had evolved and expanded over nearly 4 years. David had established an elaborate network of shell companies and nominee accounts that allowed him to receive stolen corporate funds while maintaining plausible deniability about their criminal origins. The companies had legitimate-sounding names and professional website presentations that would satisfy casual scrutiny from corporate auditors or banking compliance officers who reviewed transaction records. The sophistication of these schemes demonstrated that David possessed far more criminal expertise than I had ever suspected during our marriage. The planning and execution required for such complex fraud indicated that he had been living a double life for years, maintaining his respectable corporate executive persona while operating as a sophisticated financial criminal. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that David had been actively planning to abandon our marriage and relocate to a jurisdiction with limited extradition agreements once he had accumulated sufficient stolen funds to support a comfortable lifestyle. The divorce announcement at my birthday party was not a spontaneous decision based on relationship dissatisfaction, but rather the first step in an exit strategy designed to allow him to disappear with millions of dollars in stolen assets. The emotional impact of these revelations was profound and lasting. The man I had shared a bed with for 15 years, planned a future with, and trusted with the most intimate details of my life, had been systematically deceiving me while planning to abandon me once his criminal activities had generated sufficient proceeds. The betrayal was complete and calculated, involving not just financial crime, but the deliberate destruction of our relationship for criminal purposes. However, the professional satisfaction of building Meridian Forensic Solutions and contributing to a successful federal investigation provided psychological compensation for the personal devastation of discovering David's true character. The work had connected me with law enforcement professionals who valued my expertise and relied on my capabilities to achieve important justice objectives. More significantly, the investigation had established my credibility within the forensic accounting community, while generating referrals that would sustain and expand my consulting practice long after David's case was resolved. I had transformed personal betrayal into professional opportunity while contributing to law enforcement efforts that would protect other potential victims from similar crimes. The morning after my birthday party, sitting among the evidence that would soon destroy David's freedom and reputation, I felt a profound sense of completion and anticipation. The 18 months of investigation and preparation had culminated in a moment of perfect justice where David's attempt to humiliate and abandon me had instead exposed his criminal activities to everyone whose opinion mattered to him. The foundation of deception that David had constructed so carefully was about to collapse completely, taking with it not only his liberty and career, but also his ability to benefit from the criminal activities that had funded his arrogant belief that he could dispose of me without consequences. The woman he had dismissed as financially worthless had not only built a thriving professional practice, but had also compiled the evidence that would ensure his conviction and imprisonment. The transformation was complete, in ways that David could never have imagined when he stood up at my birthday party to announce his superiority and my inadequacy. The investigation that had begun with suspicions about financial irregularities had evolved into a comprehensive case that would establish precedents for federal prosecution of corporate embezzlement, while validating my capabilities as a forensic accounting specialist. The foundation of deception was crumbling, and David would soon discover that underestimating Eleanor Mitchell had been the most expensive mistake of his criminal career. The weeks following my birthday party revelation passed in a surreal blur of federal agents, legal proceedings, and media attention that transformed our quiet suburban neighborhood into the epicenter of one of the region's most significant white-collar crime investigations. David had been arrested exactly 72 hours after my announcement, just as I had promised our stunned dinner guests, and the subsequent investigation revealed criminal activities that exceeded even my comprehensive analysis in both scope and audacity. What the public could not understand was how the investigation had begun nearly 2 years earlier, with observations so subtle that most people would have dismissed them as routine financial management. The transformation from suspicious wife to federal consultant had required systematic skill development, strategic relationship building, and psychological preparation that enabled me to document criminal activities while maintaining normal marital interactions with someone I was helping to prosecute. The initial phase of my investigation had focused on understanding the discrepancies in our personal financial statements that suggested David was concealing significant income sources. The irregularities appeared in multiple areas simultaneously, involving unexplained cash deposits that occurred with suspicious regularity, credit card payments for expenses that David could not adequately explain when questioned, investment account activity that generated returns inconsistent with documented portfolio holdings, and travel expenses that exceeded the amounts David claimed for business purposes. Rather than confronting David directly about these observations, which would have alerted him to my suspicions and potentially compromised any future investigation, I developed a systematic approach to gathering information that would either confirm or refute my concerns about his financial activities. This decision required considerable emotional discipline, as I was essentially choosing to investigate my own husband while maintaining normal marital interactions and household routines. The methodology I developed combined traditional accounting analysis techniques with investigative approaches that I learned through professional development courses and consultation with legal experts who specialized in financial crime detection. The process required careful documentation of all financial activities, preservation of evidence in formats that would satisfy legal requirements, and coordination with law enforcement professionals who could provide guidance on investigation procedures and evidence standards. My first step involved conducting a comprehensive analysis of all financial accounts that David controlled or influenced, including corporate credit cards that he used for business purposes, investment accounts that he managed independently, banking relationships that predated our marriage, and any financial instruments that generated income or required regular payments. This analysis revealed patterns that suggested systematic diversion of funds from legitimate sources to accounts that David controlled exclusively. The corporate credit card analysis proved particularly revealing, as David's expense patterns showed consistent inflation of legitimate business costs with the excess amounts being converted to personal benefit through various mechanisms. Restaurant charges for business meals were consistently higher than the number of attendees would justify. Hotel accommodations were upgraded beyond corporate policy limits, with personal guests added to business reservations. And transportation expenses included routes and timing that suggested personal rather than business purposes. More significantly, the credit card records showed regular payments to vendors and service providers that had no apparent connection to David's official corporate responsibilities. These payments were substantial enough to represent significant ongoing expenses, but the recipients were companies I could not identify through normal business directories or professional association listings. The pattern suggested that David was using corporate resources to fund activities that were either personal in nature or related to business ventures that he had not disclosed to his employer. The investment account analysis revealed even more concerning patterns, particularly regarding the timing and amounts of deposits that appeared to correlate with David's access to corporate financial systems. Large deposits occurred regularly on dates that coincided with major corporate transactions or financial reporting periods, suggesting that David might be timing his personal financial activities to take advantage of his access to confidential corporate information. More troubling was the discovery that David maintained investment accounts at institutions where he had no obvious personal or professional relationships. These accounts received regular deposits from sources that I could not identify through normal investigation methods, while generating investment returns that seemed inconsistent with market conditions or standard portfolio performance. The overall pattern suggested that David was receiving income from sources that he was deliberately concealing from both me and potentially from tax authorities. The banking relationship analysis uncovered the most concerning evidence, involving accounts that David had opened using variations of his name and our address, but without including me as an authorized user or beneficiary. These accounts received regular wire transfers from corporate sources, including his employer Hartwell Industries, but the amounts and frequency suggested transactions that exceeded his legitimate compensation and benefit entitlements. The offshore account discovery represented the breakthrough moment that convinced me David was engaged in serious criminal activity, rather than simply concealing personal expenses or investments. Through careful analysis of international wire transfer records that I obtained through legitimate professional channels, I identified a network of accounts in jurisdictions known for banking secrecy and limited law enforcement cooperation that appeared to be receiving substantial transfers from David's domestic accounts. The sophistication of this offshore structure indicated that David possessed far more financial expertise and criminal knowledge than I had ever suspected during our marriage. The accounts were established through professional services providers who specialized in asset protection and privacy services, suggesting that David had invested considerable time and resources in developing these concealment mechanisms. More importantly, the timing of the offshore account establishment preceded any obvious marital problems or business difficulties that might have justified legitimate asset protection planning. The accounts had been created and funded systematically over several years, indicating that David's criminal activities were not opportunistic responses to financial pressure, but rather long-term strategies for wealth accumulation through illegal means. The evidence analysis phase required developing expertise in forensic accounting techniques that went far beyond my traditional corporate accounting background. I enrolled in specialized training programs offered by professional associations and law enforcement agencies, focusing on methodologies for tracing complex financial transactions, identifying patterns that revealed criminal intent, and documenting evidence in formats that would satisfy federal prosecution standards. The training programs connected me with law enforcement professionals who were struggling with similar cases involving sophisticated financial crimes that required specialized expertise to investigate effectively. These relationships proved invaluable as I developed my analysis of David's activities while building credibility within the forensic accounting community that would support my eventual consulting practice. The federal contact process required careful consideration of legal and ethical implications, as my status as David's wife created potential conflicts of interest that needed to be addressed through appropriate legal protections. I retained counsel who specialized in white-collar crime defense to ensure that my cooperation with federal authorities would be structured to minimize my personal legal exposure while maximizing the value of the information I could provide. The initial meeting with FBI financial crimes investigators exceeded my expectations in terms of their sophistication and the quality of their existing investigation into corporate fraud patterns in the region. The Bureau had been tracking suspicious transaction patterns involving multiple corporations and financial institutions, but they lacked the detailed inside knowledge necessary to understand how the schemes operated and who was responsible for their implementation. My contribution to their investigation provided the missing pieces that connected disparate evidence into a comprehensive understanding of how David's embezzlement schemes functioned and how they related to broader patterns of corporate fraud in the region. More importantly, my access to David's personal financial records and behavioral patterns allowed investigators to predict his future activities and plan intervention strategies that would maximize evidence collection while minimizing his opportunities to conceal or destroy incriminating materials. The investigation coordination phase required balancing my role as federal consultant with my obligations as David's wife, creating psychological and practical challenges that demanded considerable emotional discipline and strategic thinking. I was essentially living a double life, maintaining normal marital interactions while systematically documenting evidence that would ultimately destroy David's freedom and reputation. The emotional complexity of this situation was extraordinary and occasionally overwhelming. I was sharing daily life with someone whose criminal activities I was helping to expose, while maintaining the appearance of marital normalcy that was necessary to prevent David from becoming suspicious about my activities. Every conversation, every shared meal, every intimate moment was influenced by my knowledge of his criminal behavior and my role in the investigation that would ultimately lead to his arrest. However, the moral clarity of the situation provided psychological strength that sustained me through the most difficult periods of the investigation. David was not simply engaging in questionable business practices or minor ethical violations, but rather participating in systematic theft that victimized his employer, shareholders, and ultimately other employees whose job security depended on corporate financial stability that his criminal activities were undermining. The evidence compilation phase produced a comprehensive case file that exceeded federal prosecution standards, while providing insights into corporate fraud methodologies that would inform future investigations and prevention efforts. The documentation included detailed transaction analyses that traced stolen funds through complex laundering mechanisms, behavioral pattern analyses that revealed the planning and coordination necessary for sophisticated embezzlement, and communication records that demonstrated David's knowledge of the illegal nature of his activities. The psychological preparation for David's eventual arrest and prosecution required developing emotional resilience that would enable me to testify effectively while managing the personal aftermath of destroying my marriage for law enforcement purposes. The decision to cooperate with federal authorities had been morally necessary, but the practical consequences would affect every aspect of my personal and professional life for years to come. Hour free. The investigation had transformed me from traditional accountant to specialized forensic consultant, while providing the foundation for a consulting practice that would establish my professional independence and financial security. The expertise I developed through analyzing David's criminal activities positioned me to serve law enforcement agencies and corporate clients who needed sophisticated financial crime investigation capabilities that few professionals could provide. The secret investigation was nearing completion, and David remained completely unaware that his wife had spent nearly 2 years systematically documenting evidence that would ensure his conviction and imprisonment. The foundation for justice had been carefully constructed, and the moment for revelation was approaching rapidly. The 18 months between discovering David's criminal activities and his arrest at our birthday party represented the most intense period of professional and personal development in my life. While David continued his embezzlement schemes with increasing audacity, believing himself invisible to scrutiny, I was systematically building Meridian Forensic Solutions into a consulting practice that would establish my financial independence, while contributing to law enforcement efforts across multiple jurisdictions. The transformation required operating essentially 2 separate professional lives simultaneously. During the day, I maintained my traditional accounting consulting practice, serving small business clients with routine bookkeeping and tax preparation services that provided steady income while preserving the appearance of normal professional activity. However, the specialized forensic work that would ultimately define my career occurred during evening and weekend hours when David assumed I was engaged in community volunteer activities or personal hobbies. The forensic consulting practice began with a single case referral from Detective Maria Santos of the Financial Crimes Unit, whom I had met during my forensic accounting certification program. The case involved a municipal fraud investigation where city contractors had allegedly been inflating invoices for public works projects and sharing excess payments with corrupt officials. The complexity of the financial records and the political sensitivity of the investigation required someone with both technical expertise and discretion. The municipal fraud case provided an ideal introduction to professional forensic work because it required many of the same analytical techniques I was developing for David's investigation, while generating income that could fund expansion of my consulting capabilities. The project involved analyzing 5 years of contractor payments, identifying patterns that revealed systematic overcharging, and documenting evidence in formats that prosecutors could present effectively to juries who lacked financial expertise. The work required developing new technical skills in data analysis software that could process large volumes of financial records while identifying subtle patterns that revealed criminal intent. More importantly, the case provided experience in presenting complex financial information to law enforcement professionals who needed clear explanations of technical concepts without overwhelming detail that might obscure key findings. The success of the municipal fraud investigation generated immediate referrals from other law enforcement agencies who were struggling with similar cases involving sophisticated financial crimes. The Regional District Attorney's Office retained me for a case involving charity fraud, where nonprofit executives had been diverting donations for personal benefit. The State Attorney General's Office engaged my services for an investigation into investment fraud targeting elderly victims through complex securities manipulation schemes. Each new case expanded my expertise while building relationships within the law enforcement community that would prove invaluable as my practice grew. The work was intellectually challenging and professionally rewarding in ways that traditional accounting had never provided. More significantly, the forensic consulting generated substantially higher fees than conventional accounting services, while positioning me as a specialist in a field with limited competition and growing demand. The reputation-building process required careful attention to professional credibility and technical competence that would satisfy the rigorous standards of federal prosecution teams. Each case report had to meet evidentiary requirements that could withstand aggressive cross-examination by defense attorneys who specialized in challenging financial crime prosecutions. The documentation standards demanded precision and thoroughness that exceeded anything required in traditional accounting practice. The financial rewards of forensic consulting enabled investments in technology and professional development that accelerated my capabilities while supporting expansion into more complex cases. High-performance computing equipment allowed analysis of massive datasets that revealed patterns invisible through manual review. Specialized software provided visualization tools that could present complex financial relationships in formats that juries and judges could understand intuitively. Professional development opportunities included advanced training programs offered by federal law enforcement agencies, specialized conferences where forensic accountants shared methodologies and case studies, and certification programs that established credibility within the legal community. These investments required substantial time and financial commitments, but they positioned me to compete for the highest-level consulting engagements while building expertise that few professionals possessed. The networking aspect of building the practice proved as important as technical skill development. The forensic accounting community was relatively small and tightly connected, with successful consultants regularly referring cases to colleagues who possessed specialized expertise or capacity for large engagements. Building trust and credibility within this professional network required consistent delivery of high-quality work while maintaining absolute confidentiality about sensitive investigations. The client base expansion occurred organically through referrals from satisfied law enforcement clients who recommended my services to colleagues facing similar challenges. Corporate clients began requesting forensic services for internal investigations involving employee theft, vendor fraud, and regulatory compliance violations. Insurance companies engaged my services to investigate suspicious claims that might involve deliberate fraud or collusion between claimants and service providers. The corporate fraud investigations proved particularly valuable because they provided experience with the types of sophisticated embezzlement schemes that David was implementing at Hartwell Industries. Each case enhanced my understanding of how criminals exploited corporate control systems while developing expertise in tracing complex financial transactions through multiple institutions and jurisdictions. The insurance fraud work introduced me to investigation techniques that proved applicable to David's offshore account structure. Insurance fraudsters often used similar concealment methods to hide assets and income from legitimate scrutiny, requiring forensic accountants to trace funds through elaborate networks of shell companies and nominee accounts that obscured beneficial ownership and control relationships. The Federal Bureau of Investigation engagement represented the pinnacle of my professional development and the most significant validation of my forensic capabilities. The Bureau's Financial Crimes Division had been tracking patterns of corporate embezzlement throughout the region, but lacked the specialized expertise necessary to understand how the schemes operated and identify the individuals responsible for their implementation. My role as primary consultant on the federal investigation provided access to resources and information that would have been impossible to obtain through independent practice. The Bureau's analytical capabilities, surveillance resources, and coordination with international law enforcement agencies enabled investigation of criminal activities that crossed jurisdictional boundaries and involved sophisticated concealment mechanisms. The federal casework required security clearances and confidentiality agreements that formalized my relationship with law enforcement, while protecting sensitive investigation techniques and information sources. The professional recognition implicit in these arrangements validated my expertise while establishing relationships that would support continued growth of my consulting practice after David's case was resolved. The operational challenges of maintaining my expanding practice while preserving the secrecy necessary for David's investigation required sophisticated time management and compartmentalization skills. Each client engagement demanded complete attention and professional excellence, while the David investigation required ongoing monitoring and evidence compilation that could not be delayed or compromised. The emotional complexity of building professional success through investigation of my husband's criminal activities created psychological challenges that required considerable resilience and strategic thinking. Every achievement in my forensic practice was connected to knowledge of David's betrayal, while every expansion of my capabilities increased my value to the federal investigation that would ultimately destroy our marriage. However, the professional satisfaction of building something meaningful and valuable provided psychological compensation for the personal devastation of discovering David's true character. The work connected me with law enforcement professionals who valued expertise and dedication while contributing to justice outcomes that protected other potential victims from similar crimes. The financial independence achieved through forensic consulting eliminated any economic dependence on David's income while providing security that would enable me to pursue opportunities based on professional interest rather than financial necessity. The success of Meridian Forensic Solutions had transformed me from traditional accountant to specialized consultant, whose services were valued by clients across multiple industries and jurisdictions. The business growth metrics were extraordinary by any professional standard. Revenue had increased from modest part-time consulting fees to substantial quarterly income that exceeded David's corporate salary. Client satisfaction scores were consistently high, with repeat engagements and referrals providing sustainable growth without expensive marketing campaigns or aggressive business development efforts. More importantly, the expertise I had developed through forensic consulting positioned me to serve markets that few competitors could address effectively. The combination of technical accounting skills, investigative experience, and law enforcement relationships created competitive advantages that were difficult for established firms to replicate, while enabling me to command premium fees for specialized services. The psychological transformation accompanying this professional success was as significant as the financial achievements. The depression and self-doubt that had characterized my response to discovering David's deception had been replaced by confidence and excitement about future possibilities. The work provided purpose and meaning that extended beyond personal financial security to contribute to broader justice objectives that protected corporate integrity and public trust. The secret empire I had built while David pursued his criminal activities represented complete vindication of capabilities that he had dismissed and achievements that he could never have imagined. The woman he planned to abandon as financially worthless had developed expertise and built relationships that would ensure not only my professional success, but also his criminal prosecution and imprisonment. The foundation was complete, the evidence was compiled, and the moment for revelation was approaching. David's arrest would mark not only the end of his criminal career, but also the beginning of a new phase, where I could operate openly with capabilities that had been developed and proven through the most challenging investigation of my professional life. The final 6 months before David's arrest represented the most intensive investigative period of my career, as federal authorities coordinated a comprehensive operation designed to capture not only David's criminal activities, but also the broader network of corporate fraud that his schemes had revealed. My role expanded from consultant to primary investigative coordinator, managing multiple streams of evidence while ensuring that David remained unaware of the surveillance and documentation activities occurring around him daily. The complexity of the federal investigation exceeded anything I had experienced in my forensic consulting practice. David's embezzlement schemes connected to similar criminal activities at other corporations throughout the region, suggesting either coordinated fraud rings or copycat criminals who had learned techniques from successful embezzlers. The Bureau's Financial Crimes Division needed to understand these connections while building cases that would withstand aggressive defense strategies and potential appeals. My expertise in analyzing David's specific methodologies provided insights into how these broader fraud networks operated and communicated. The techniques David employed for creating false vendor relationships, manipulating expense reporting systems, and concealing offshore transfers appeared in other cases with variations that suggested either direct coordination between criminals or systematic sharing of successful fraud methodologies through professional or social networks. The surveillance coordination required balancing comprehensive evidence collection with operational security that prevented David from discovering the investigation before federal agents were prepared to execute arrests and asset seizures. David's position as Chief Financial Officer at Hartwell Industries provided him with access to sophisticated anti-fraud systems that could potentially detect unusual scrutiny of his activities if the investigation was not managed with extreme care. The technical surveillance involved monitoring David's electronic communications, tracking his financial transactions in real time, documenting his travel patterns and meeting schedules, and coordinating with international law enforcement agencies to trace his offshore account activities. Each surveillance method required specific legal authorizations and operational protocols that ensured evidence would satisfy federal prosecution standards while protecting the investigation from potential legal challenges. My contribution to this surveillance effort focused on predicting David's behavior based on my intimate knowledge of his personality, decision-making patterns, and response to various types of stress or opportunity. This behavioral analysis helped federal agents anticipate which surveillance methods would be most effective while avoiding detection techniques that might alert David to the investigation. The financial transaction monitoring revealed that David's criminal activities had accelerated significantly during the months preceding his planned divorce announcement. The timing suggested that he was accumulating maximum stolen assets before implementing his exit strategy, which apparently involved divorcing me to eliminate potential claim to criminal proceeds and relocating to a jurisdiction where extradition would be difficult or impossible. The offshore account analysis uncovered a sophisticated asset protection structure that extended beyond simple tax avoidance into systematic money laundering designed to obscure the criminal origins of David's wealth. Professional services providers in multiple jurisdictions had assisted in creating shell companies, nominee account relationships, and trust structures that would make asset recovery extremely difficult if David succeeded in relocating before his criminal activities were discovered. The international coordination aspect of the investigation required working with law enforcement agencies in countries where David maintained financial accounts and business relationships. These agencies provided crucial assistance in tracing fund transfers, identifying beneficial ownership of complex corporate structures, and preparing for potential asset seizures that would prevent David from accessing stolen funds, even if he attempted to flee prosecution. The evidence compilation process during this period generated thousands of pages of documentation that traced every aspect of David's criminal enterprise, from its inception through his most recent fraudulent transactions. The comprehensive nature of this evidence ensured that federal prosecutors would have multiple independent proofs of criminal activity, while providing backup documentation if any specific evidence was challenged or excluded during trial proceedings. The psychological pressure of maintaining normal marital interactions while coordinating a federal investigation that would result in David's imprisonment required emotional resilience that tested every aspect of my character and professional training. Each conversation with David carried potential evidentiary value, while every shared activity created opportunities for him to inadvertently reveal information about his criminal associates or future plans. The domestic surveillance environment created particularly complex challenges, as federal agents needed access to information about David's activities within our home, while protecting the investigation from discovery through routine security precautions that David might employ. My cooperation enabled this access while maintaining plausible explanations for any unusual circumstances that David might notice. The communication monitoring revealed that David was coordinating with other individuals who appeared to be engaged in similar embezzlement schemes at their respective employers. These communications provided evidence of conspiracy charges while identifying additional targets for federal investigation. The coordination suggested that corporate fraud was more systematic and widespread than previously understood by law enforcement agencies. The business relationship analysis uncovered connections between David's criminal activities and vendors, consultants, and service providers who appeared to be facilitating embezzlement schemes through various mechanisms. These relationships included legitimate businesses that were unknowingly processing fraudulent transactions, as well as entities that were specifically created to support money laundering and asset concealment activities. The timeline development process revealed that David's criminal activities had evolved from opportunistic theft of small amounts to systematic embezzlement of substantial corporate resources over a period of several years. The progression demonstrated increasing sophistication and boldness that suggested David felt confident about his ability to avoid detection while accumulating wealth that would support comfortable lifestyle indefinitely. The asset tracing activities identified the full extent of David's criminal proceeds while mapping the complex networks of accounts, investments, and business relationships that he had created to conceal and protect stolen funds. The total amount exceeded initial estimates significantly, representing one of the largest individual embezzlement cases in the region's history. The civil asset forfeiture preparation involved coordinating with federal attorneys who specialized in recovering criminal proceeds through legal mechanisms that operated independently of criminal prosecution outcomes. These procedures would ensure that stolen funds could be recovered for victims regardless of potential plea agreements or trial results that might affect David's criminal penalties. The victim impact analysis revealed that David's crimes affected not only his direct employer but also shareholders, employees, vendors, and community organizations that depended on corporate financial stability and charitable contributions that his theft had reduced. The comprehensive nature of these impacts strengthened the federal case while providing additional motivation for aggressive prosecution. The co-conspirator investigation identified several individuals who had assisted David's criminal activities through various forms of participation, ranging from direct coordination to provision of specialized services that enabled money laundering and asset concealment. These individuals faced potential prosecution for conspiracy, money laundering, and other federal charges related to their roles in David's criminal enterprise. The operational security measures during this period required constant vigilance to ensure that David did not discover the investigation through surveillance detection, communication interception, or unusual changes in routine activities that might indicate law enforcement interest. My role involved monitoring David's behavior for signs of suspicion while providing early warning to federal agents if investigative activities needed to be modified or suspended. The legal preparation phase involved extensive coordination with federal prosecutors who were developing charging strategies that would maximize potential penalties, while ensuring that evidence could be presented effectively to juries who lacked specialized knowledge of complex financial crimes. My expertise in explaining technical concepts to non-expert audiences proved valuable in developing presentation strategies that would support successful prosecution. The arrest planning process required coordinating multiple law enforcement agencies while ensuring that evidence preservation and asset seizure activities occurred simultaneously to prevent David from destroying incriminating materials or accessing hidden funds. The complexity of these arrangements demanded precise timing and flawless execution to maximize investigative success. The personal preparation for David's arrest and the public exposure of his criminal activities required psychological readiness for media attention, community reactions, and professional implications that would affect every aspect of my life. The success of my forensic consulting practice would provide financial security and professional credibility that would enable me to navigate these challenges while maintaining focus on continued business development. The anticipation of justice being served after months of careful investigation and evidence compilation created a sense of completion and vindication that validated the personal sacrifices required to expose David's crimes. The knowledge that his arrest would protect other potential victims while ensuring accountability for his criminal activities provided meaning and purpose that transcended personal considerations. The web of evidence had been carefully constructed through systematic investigation and comprehensive documentation that would ensure David's conviction while contributing to broader law enforcement understanding of corporate fraud methodologies. The moment for revelation was approaching, and the foundation for justice had been established through meticulous preparation and unwavering commitment to truth. The mastery of living dual identities while coordinating a federal investigation against my own husband represented the most psychologically demanding period of my professional career. Each morning brought fresh challenges in maintaining the appearance of normal domestic life while managing investigative activities that would ultimately result in David's arrest and imprisonment. The emotional complexity required developing compartmentalization skills that enabled me to function effectively in both roles without compromising either the investigation or my personal safety. The operational demands of coordinating federal surveillance while preserving marital normalcy created daily situations that tested every aspect of my training and character. Federal agents required regular access to information about David's activities, schedules, and behavioral patterns, while David himself needed to remain completely unaware that his wife was serving as the primary source for an investigation that would destroy his freedom and reputation. The communication protocols established with federal investigators required sophisticated security measures that ensured our coordination could not be detected through routine surveillance precautions that David might employ. Encrypted messaging systems allowed real-time information sharing about David's activities, while secure meeting locations provided opportunities for detailed briefings and evidence review that could not be conducted through electronic channels. The domestic intelligence gathering process involved monitoring David's telephone conversations, documenting his travel patterns and meeting schedules, tracking his computer usage and online activities, and observing his behavioral changes that might indicate stress, suspicion, or planning for emergency evacuation. Each observation required careful analysis to distinguish between routine activities and potentially significant developments that warranted immediate federal attention. The psychological profile development became increasingly sophisticated as I documented David's responses to various types of pressure and opportunity. Federal investigators needed to understand how David might react to discovering the investigation, what his most likely escape strategies would involve, and which psychological approaches would be most effective during interrogation and potential cooperation negotiations. The behavioral prediction capabilities I developed proved invaluable to federal planning efforts. My analysis enabled agents to anticipate which surveillance methods would be most effective while avoiding detection techniques that might alert David to unusual scrutiny. The insights also informed decisions about optimal timing for various investigative activities and arrest procedures that would maximize evidence preservation while minimizing David's opportunities for asset concealment or destruction. The financial monitoring activities during this period revealed accelerating criminal behavior, as David appeared to sense that his window of opportunity for asset accumulation might be closing. The increased frequency and sophistication of fraudulent transactions suggested that he was implementing an exit strategy that involved maximizing stolen proceeds before abandoning his position at Hartwell Industries and potentially fleeing prosecution. The offshore asset analysis uncovered additional accounts and investment vehicles that David had not disclosed in previous financial statements or tax filings. These discoveries expanded the scope of the federal investigation, while providing evidence of systematic tax evasion that would support additional criminal charges beyond the primary embezzlement allegations. The professional relationship management required maintaining credibility within the forensic accounting community while protecting sensitive information about the federal investigation that could compromise operational security if disclosed prematurely. Client communications needed to reflect normal business development activities, while concealing the extraordinary circumstances surrounding my primary consulting engagement with federal law enforcement agencies. The expansion of Meridian Forensic Solutions continued despite the demands of the federal investigation, as new client referrals provided both income diversification and professional credibility that would support business growth after David's case was resolved. Each new engagement demonstrated capabilities that attracted additional referrals, while building expertise in areas that complemented my federal consulting responsibilities. The corporate fraud cases that comprised the majority of my client portfolio provided valuable experience with investigation methodologies and evidence documentation standards that enhanced my contributions to the federal case against David. The skills developed through independent consulting work improved my ability to analyze complex financial transactions while presenting findings in formats that prosecutors could use effectively during trial proceedings. The insurance fraud investigations introduced me to sophisticated asset tracing techniques that proved applicable to David's offshore account structure. The methodologies for identifying beneficial ownership of shell companies and tracking funds through complex international transfers enhanced my ability to support federal efforts to locate and freeze David's hidden assets before he could access them for escape funding. The law enforcement networking activities expanded my professional relationships within the federal community while establishing credibility that would support continued consulting opportunities after the David investigation concluded. These relationships provided access to advanced training programs and case coordination opportunities that would not have been available through traditional consulting channels. The technology infrastructure investments enabled more sophisticated analysis capabilities while ensuring that all investigative activities met federal standards for evidence preservation and chain of custody documentation. High-performance computing systems allowed processing of massive datasets, while specialized software provided visualization tools that could present complex financial relationships in formats that juries and judges could understand intuitively. The operational security measures during this period required constant vigilance to ensure that David did not discover evidence of investigative activities through routine security precautions or accidental exposure of sensitive materials. Document storage systems needed to be completely secure while remaining accessible for ongoing analysis and federal coordination requirements. The communication security protocols involved multiple layers of encryption and authentication that protected sensitive information while enabling real-time coordination with federal agents who needed immediate access to developments in David's behavior or activities. The systems provided secure channels for sharing documents, coordinating surveillance activities, and planning operational responses to changing circumstances. The psychological management of maintaining intimate relationships with someone whose criminal activities I was documenting required emotional resilience that tested every aspect of my character and professional training. Every conversation carried potential evidentiary value, while every shared activity created opportunities for David to inadvertently reveal information about his criminal associates or future plans. The domestic environment created particularly complex challenges as federal agents needed access to information about David's home-based activities, while protecting the investigation from discovery through routine security measures that David might employ. My cooperation enabled this access while maintaining plausible explanations for any unusual circumstances that David might notice. The marital interaction management required sophisticated acting skills that concealed my knowledge of David's criminal activities while maintaining normal emotional responses to his behavior and decisions. The upcoming divorce announcement at my birthday party needed to appear genuinely surprising, while my response had to reflect appropriate shock and confusion, rather than the satisfaction I would feel at finally revealing the consequences of his criminal behavior. The evidence compilation activities during this period generated comprehensive documentation that traced every aspect of David's criminal enterprise, while establishing clear connections to co-conspirators and supporting organizations. The thoroughness of this evidence ensured that federal prosecutors would have multiple independent proofs of criminal activity, while providing backup documentation if specific evidence was challenged during trial proceedings. The asset recovery preparation involved coordinating with federal attorneys who specialized in civil forfeiture procedures that would enable recovery of stolen funds regardless of criminal prosecution outcomes. These legal mechanisms operated independently of criminal penalties while ensuring that victims could recover losses, even if plea agreements or trial results affected David's specific punishment. The victim impact documentation revealed the comprehensive nature of damage caused by David's crimes, affecting not only direct corporate losses, but also shareholder value, employee security, vendor relationships, and community organizations that depended on corporate financial stability and charitable contributions. This analysis strengthened the federal case while providing motivation for aggressive prosecution that would deter similar crimes. The co-conspirator investigation identified networks of individuals who had assisted David's criminal activities through various forms of participation. These connections revealed broader patterns of corporate fraud that extended the federal investigation beyond David's individual case, while providing opportunities for comprehensive prosecution of organized criminal enterprises. The international coordination efforts involved working with law enforcement agencies in multiple jurisdictions to trace asset transfers and identify beneficial ownership of complex offshore structures. This cooperation provided crucial assistance in preparing for asset seizures that would prevent David from accessing stolen funds, even if he attempted to flee prosecution. The arrest planning coordination required precise timing and flawless execution to ensure simultaneous evidence preservation and asset seizure activities that would maximize investigative success while preventing David from destroying incriminating materials or accessing hidden accounts. The complexity of these arrangements demanded sophisticated operational planning that accounted for multiple contingencies and potential complications. The personal preparation for the revelation moment involved psychological readiness for the dramatic confrontation that would occur when David's criminal activities were exposed publicly during my birthday party announcement. The satisfaction of revealing his arrest warrant after his divorce announcement would provide vindication for months of careful investigation while demonstrating the consequences of underestimating my capabilities and commitment to justice. The federal investigation expanded dramatically during the weeks preceding my birthday party, as evidence emerged connecting David's embezzlement schemes to a sophisticated network of corporate fraud involving multiple companies throughout the metropolitan region. What had initially appeared to be an isolated case of individual criminal behavior revealed itself as part of a systematic operation that involved coordinated theft, shared money laundering infrastructure, and professional services providers who specialized in facilitating white-collar crime. The complexity of this criminal network required federal investigators to reassess their prosecution strategy while coordinating with additional law enforcement agencies who had been tracking similar cases without recognizing the connections between apparently independent criminal activities. My expertise in analyzing David's specific methodologies provided crucial insights into how the broader network operated while revealing patterns that enabled investigators to predict and prevent additional criminal activities. The investigation revealed that David's embezzlement techniques had been refined through collaboration with other corporate executives who occupied similar positions at companies throughout the region. These individuals shared information about successful fraud methodologies while coordinating their activities to avoid detection patterns that might alert law enforcement agencies to the systematic nature of their criminal enterprise. The communication analysis uncovered regular coordination meetings disguised as legitimate business networking events where criminal conspirators exchanged information about effective theft techniques, reliable money laundering services, and secure offshore investment opportunities. These gatherings occurred at upscale restaurants and private clubs, where business discussions appeared normal, while actually facilitating criminal coordination and planning. The financial institution analysis revealed that several banks and investment firms had unknowingly processed fraudulent transactions, while providing services that enabled systematic money laundering activities. The institutions maintained compliance programs designed to detect suspicious financial activities, but the sophistication of the criminal network had enabled successful circumvention of standard detection mechanisms through carefully structured transaction patterns and professional documentation. The professional services investigation identified attorneys, accountants, and financial consultants who had provided specialized assistance to criminal network participants. Some of these professionals appeared to be unwitting accomplices who had been deceived about the nature of their clients' activities, while others demonstrated knowledge and participation that warranted separate criminal prosecution for conspiracy and money laundering charges. The offshore infrastructure analysis uncovered a comprehensive system of shell companies, nominee accounts, and trust structures that had been created specifically to support the criminal network's asset concealment and money laundering requirements. This infrastructure involved service providers in multiple jurisdictions who specialized in creating legal entities that obscured beneficial ownership while providing mechanisms for accessing hidden funds without triggering reporting requirements. The scope expansion required additional federal resources while creating opportunities for more comprehensive prosecution that would dismantle the entire criminal network rather than focusing solely on individual participants. The investigation became a model for federal efforts to combat organized white-collar crime through systematic analysis of criminal methodologies and coordinated prosecution strategies that addressed both individual crimes and underlying criminal enterprises. The evidence coordination challenges required sophisticated case management systems that could track thousands of financial transactions while maintaining clear connections between individual criminal activities and broader network operations. The documentation standards demanded precision and thoroughness that would satisfy multiple prosecution teams while providing comprehensive evidence for potential civil recovery proceedings. The international cooperation aspects involved working with law enforcement agencies in countries where network participants maintained financial accounts and business relationships. These agencies provided crucial assistance in tracing fund transfers while preparing for coordinated asset seizures that would prevent criminals from accessing hidden proceeds, even if they attempted to flee prosecution. The victim impact analysis revealed that the criminal network had caused substantially more damage than initially estimated when the investigation focused solely on David's individual activities. The comprehensive theft totaled more than $15 million across multiple corporate victims while creating additional damages through reduced shareholder value, employee layoffs necessitated by financial losses, and disrupted vendor relationships that affected entire business communities. The corporate security implications extended beyond immediate financial losses to include compromised internal control systems that had been systematically exploited by criminal network participants. The investigation revealed specific vulnerabilities in corporate financial oversight mechanisms, while providing insights that would enable other organizations to strengthen their fraud prevention capabilities. The law enforcement coordination involved multiple federal agencies along with state and local investigators who had been working related cases without recognizing the connections between apparently independent criminal activities. The information sharing and joint operation planning required sophisticated coordination mechanisms that ensured effective resource utilization while avoiding duplicated efforts or conflicting investigative strategies. The prosecution strategy development involved federal attorneys who specialized in complex financial crime cases, along with prosecutors from multiple jurisdictions where network participants had committed related offenses. The coordination required careful planning to ensure that individual prosecutions strengthened rather than compromised broader network cases, while maximizing potential penalties for all criminal participants. The asset recovery planning required comprehensive mapping of criminal proceeds while coordinating seizure activities across multiple jurisdictions and financial institutions. The complexity of hidden asset structures demanded sophisticated tracing capabilities, while legal preparation ensured that recovery mechanisms would survive aggressive defense challenges during both criminal and civil proceedings. The public safety considerations involved assessing potential flight risks among network participants, while implementing surveillance and monitoring procedures that would prevent destruction of evidence or unauthorized access to hidden criminal proceeds. The coordination required balancing investigative security with operational efficiency, while ensuring that all criminal participants could be arrested simultaneously to prevent coordination of defense strategies. The media management strategy required careful consideration of public disclosure timing and content that would support prosecution objectives while protecting ongoing investigative activities related to network participants who had not yet been identified or arrested. The high-profile nature of the case created opportunities for public education about corporate fraud prevention while demonstrating federal commitment to aggressive white-collar crime prosecution. The business community impact involved working with corporate security professionals and industry associations to share fraud prevention insights while strengthening detection capabilities that would prevent similar criminal networks from operating successfully in the future. The educational aspects provided value that extended beyond specific prosecution outcomes to include systemic improvements in corporate fraud prevention and detection. The professional development opportunities created through participation in this comprehensive investigation established my credibility within federal law enforcement agencies, while demonstrating capabilities that positioned Meridian Forensic Solutions for significant expansion into complex multi-jurisdictional cases. The expertise developed through analyzing network operations provided competitive advantages that few consulting practices could match. The testimony preparation required developing presentation capabilities that could explain complex financial relationships to juries while maintaining technical accuracy that would satisfy aggressive cross-examination by defense attorneys specializing in white-collar crime defense. The communication skills developed through this process enhanced my value to prosecution teams while improving my effectiveness in client consulting relationships. The case study development provided educational materials that would support training programs for law enforcement investigators and corporate security professionals who needed to understand how sophisticated criminal networks operated and how their activities could be detected and prevented. The academic value extended beyond immediate prosecution benefits to include long-term improvements in investigative methodologies and prevention strategies. The network dismantling process required coordinated arrests and asset seizures that would prevent criminal participants from destroying evidence or accessing hidden proceeds, while ensuring that all relevant evidence was preserved for prosecution purposes. The operational complexity demanded precise timing and flawless execution that would maximize investigative success while minimizing opportunities for criminal coordination or escape. The investigation had revealed that David's individual criminal activities were part of a much larger criminal enterprise that threatened corporate integrity and public trust throughout the business community. The comprehensive nature of the federal response demonstrated commitment to aggressive prosecution while providing deterrent effects that would discourage similar criminal activities by other potential offenders. The personal satisfaction of contributing to this comprehensive investigation provided vindication for the professional and personal sacrifices required to expose David's crimes, while demonstrating how individual expertise could contribute to broader justice objectives that protected entire business communities from systematic criminal exploitation. The moment for revealing these broader implications was approaching as federal authorities prepared for coordinated action that would expose the full scope of criminal activities while ensuring accountability for all network participants. The 3 weeks preceding my 40th birthday party represented the most intensive surveillance period of the entire federal investigation, as law enforcement agencies coordinated comprehensive monitoring of the criminal network while preparing for simultaneous arrests that would prevent coordination between conspirators and preserve maximum evidence for prosecution. My role evolved from consultant to operational coordinator, managing real-time intelligence while ensuring that David remained completely unaware of the investigation closing around him. The operational intensity required federal agents to maintain constant surveillance of multiple targets while coordinating with international law enforcement agencies who were monitoring offshore accounts and preparing for asset seizure activities. The complexity demanded precise timing and flawless execution to ensure that criminal network participants could not destroy evidence, coordinate defense strategies, or access hidden assets that would enable flight from prosecution. The behavioral analysis during this period revealed increasing stress indicators in David's conduct that suggested he was sensing potential exposure despite having no specific knowledge of the federal investigation. His sleep patterns became irregular, his consumption of alcohol increased noticeably, and his telephone conversations with known associates became more cautious and abbreviated than previous communications patterns had indicated. The financial transaction monitoring detected accelerated movement of funds through David's offshore accounts as he appeared to implement emergency asset protection protocols that would maximize his access to criminal proceeds while minimizing potential exposure to asset seizure procedures. The transactions indicated sophisticated understanding of international banking regulations and asset protection mechanisms that exceeded his documented financial expertise. The communication surveillance revealed increased coordination between network participants as they appeared to sense heightened scrutiny of their activities, despite having no specific information about federal investigation activities. The conversations became more coded and less specific, while meeting locations shifted to venues that would provide better operational security against potential law enforcement surveillance. The technology monitoring uncovered evidence that David had begun implementing digital security measures designed to protect sensitive communications and financial information from potential discovery by law enforcement agencies. These measures included encrypted communication applications, secure file deletion software, and virtual private network services that would complicate efforts to monitor his online activities. The travel pattern analysis indicated that David was preparing for potential emergency evacuation through coordination with travel agencies that specialized in rapid international transportation and jurisdictions, with limited extradition cooperation. The preparations included obtaining documentation that would facilitate quick departure, while establishing financial access mechanisms that would support extended residence in foreign locations. The asset liquidation monitoring revealed systematic conversion of legitimate investments into forms that would enable rapid access and international transfer without triggering standard banking reporting requirements. The activities indicated sophisticated planning for potential flight scenarios, while demonstrating knowledge of financial mechanisms that would complicate law enforcement asset recovery efforts. The network coordination surveillance detected increased communication between criminal participants, as they appeared to implement mutual warning systems designed to alert associates if any individual participant faced law enforcement scrutiny. These systems included coded communication protocols and emergency contact procedures that would enable rapid coordination of defense strategies. The operational security measures required constant vigilance to ensure that intensive surveillance activities did not alert David or other network participants to the investigation through detection of unusual law enforcement presence or changes in routine activities that might indicate heightened scrutiny. The coordination demanded sophisticated counter-surveillance techniques that maintained investigative effectiveness while protecting operational security. The evidence preservation protocols ensured that all surveillance activities generated documentation that would satisfy federal prosecution standards while providing comprehensive records of criminal activities during the final phases of network operations. The standards required precise chain of custody procedures and detailed documentation that would withstand aggressive defense challenges during trial proceedings. The international coordination intensified as law enforcement agencies in multiple jurisdictions prepared for simultaneous asset seizure activities that would prevent network participants from accessing offshore accounts or transferring funds to locations where recovery would be impossible. The coordination required sophisticated legal cooperation and precise timing that would maximize asset recovery while supporting prosecution objectives. The prosecution preparation accelerated as federal attorneys finalized charging strategies that would ensure maximum penalties for network participants while providing opportunities for cooperation agreements that might facilitate additional investigations into related criminal activities. The strategies balanced individual accountability with broader deterrent effects that would discourage similar criminal enterprises. The victim notification procedures required careful coordination with corporate security teams and law enforcement agencies to ensure that affected organizations received appropriate information about criminal activities, while protecting ongoing investigative activities related to network participants who had not yet been identified or arrested. The notifications provided crucial support for corporate recovery efforts while maintaining investigative security. The media strategy development involved federal public affairs specialists who were preparing comprehensive disclosure plans that would maximize public education benefits while protecting sensitive investigative techniques and ongoing operations related to criminal network activities. The strategy balanced transparency objectives with operational security requirements that would support continued law enforcement effectiveness. The personal preparation during this period required extraordinary emotional resilience, as I managed the psychological complexity of coordinating an investigation that would result in my husband's arrest while maintaining normal domestic relationships that concealed my role in federal law enforcement activities. The compartmentalization demanded sophisticated emotional management techniques that enabled effective performance in both roles. The domestic intelligence gathering reached maximum intensity, as federal agents required detailed information about David's activities, behavioral patterns, and potential responses to various investigative scenarios. The intelligence enabled precise planning for arrest procedures while providing insights that would support interrogation strategies and potential cooperation negotiations. The professional relationship management required maintaining credibility within the forensic accounting community, while protecting sensitive information about federal investigation activities that could compromise operational security if disclosed prematurely. The balance demanded careful communication strategies that preserved professional relationships while protecting investigative integrity. The business development activities continued despite the extraordinary demands of federal coordination, as new client referrals required professional attention while providing income diversification that would support practice expansion after the David investigation concluded. The work demonstrated commitment to long-term business objectives while maintaining service quality that supported continued referral generation. The technology infrastructure management required sophisticated security measures that protected sensitive federal information, while enabling real-time coordination with law enforcement agencies who needed immediate access to intelligence about David's activities and behavioral changes. The systems provided secure communication channels while maintaining comprehensive audit trails that satisfied federal documentation requirements. The operational coordination reached peak complexity as multiple law enforcement agencies prepared for coordinated actions that would maximize evidence preservation while preventing criminal network participants from coordinating defense strategies or accessing hidden assets. The planning required precise timing and comprehensive contingency preparation that accounted for potential complications and unexpected developments. The psychological preparation for the confrontation moment intensified as the birthday party approached, and David appeared to finalize his divorce announcement strategy while remaining completely unaware that federal agents were prepared to execute arrest warrants within hours of his public humiliation attempt. The anticipation of revealing his criminal exposure after his marriage termination announcement provided motivation that sustained me through the most demanding period of the entire investigation. The evidence compilation reached comprehensive completion as federal investigators finalized documentation that traced every aspect of the criminal network's operations, while providing multiple independent proofs of individual participant guilt. The thoroughness ensured that prosecution teams would have overwhelming evidence while providing backup documentation if specific materials were challenged during trial proceedings. The asset recovery preparation achieved sophisticated coordination between federal agencies and international law enforcement organizations that would enable simultaneous seizure of criminal proceeds across multiple jurisdictions and financial institutions. The coordination provided maximum asset recovery potential while preventing network participants from accessing funds that would enable flight from prosecution. The network dismantling plan reached operational readiness as federal authorities prepared for coordinated arrests that would capture all identified criminal participants while preserving maximum evidence and preventing destruction of incriminating materials. The complexity demanded flawless execution that would achieve comprehensive law enforcement objectives while demonstrating federal commitment to aggressive white-collar crime prosecution. The moment of revelation was approaching as David prepared to announce his superiority and my inadequacy at the birthday party celebration, completely unaware that his wife had spent months coordinating the federal investigation that would result in his arrest and the destruction of the criminal network he had helped to create and operate. The morning of my 40th birthday dawned with crystalline clarity that seemed to mirror the precision of federal planning that had culminated in this moment of revelation. Every detail of the evening's celebration had been coordinated between David's theatrical arrangements for public humiliation and federal authorities, preparation for the dramatic exposure of criminal activities that would transform the gathering from personal milestone into justice demonstration. David's behavior throughout the day reflected the confidence of someone who believed himself to be orchestrating the perfect exit strategy from what he considered an economically disadvantageous marriage. His attention to party details exceeded anything he had demonstrated during our 15 years together, suggesting that this celebration represented more than simple birthday recognition but rather served as the stage for announcing his perceived liberation from financial responsibility and personal obligation. The venue selection at Riverside Country Club provided the elegant backdrop that David required for maximum impact during his divorce announcement. The ballroom's crystal chandeliers and marble floors created an atmosphere of refined celebration that would amplify the contrast between festive expectations and devastating personal revelation. The setting demonstrated David's calculation that public disclosure would pressure me into accepting his divorce terms without resistance or detailed financial investigation. The guest coordination revealed David's strategic thinking about audience composition for his planned announcement. The invitation list included colleagues from both our professional circles, neighbors from our upscale community, family members who had invested emotional support in our marriage, and friends whose opinions carried social weight within our established networks. The comprehensive attendance ensured maximum witnesses to his declaration, while creating social pressure that he expected would prevent dramatic responses from me. The catering arrangements exceeded normal celebration standards, with premium menu selections and extensive bar services that demonstrated David's commitment to creating memorable experiences for guests who would remember both the quality of entertainment and the shocking nature of his announcement. The expenditure represented ironic generosity given his complaints about my alleged financial drain on household resources. The federal surveillance coordination during these preparation hours required sophisticated operational security that ensured investigative activities remained completely invisible. while enabling real-time monitoring of David's behavior and communications. Federal agents needed comprehensive intelligence about party logistics, while maintaining absolute secrecy about arrest preparations that would unfold within hours of David's planned announcement. The technology monitoring revealed increased communication activity between David and his criminal network associates, as he appeared to coordinate final asset protection measures before implementing his divorce strategy. The conversations indicated confidence about his exit planning while revealing additional evidence of conspiracy charges that would strengthen federal prosecution efforts against all network participants. The asset tracking systems detected final transfers through David's offshore accounts, as he consolidated criminal proceeds into forms that would provide maximum access flexibility while minimizing exposure to potential seizure procedures. The sophisticated financial maneuvering demonstrated criminal expertise that exceeded his documented professional qualifications, while providing evidence of systematic money laundering activities. The professional preparation required managing my expanding forensic consulting practice while coordinating with federal authorities, who needed final intelligence updates before executing arrest procedures. Client communications needed to reflect normal business operations, while concealing the extraordinary circumstances that would transform my professional reputation within hours of the evening's revelations. The psychological preparation demanded extraordinary emotional discipline, as I managed anticipation of justice being served while maintaining normal domestic interactions with someone whose criminal activities I had documented comprehensively. The compartmentalization required sophisticated mental techniques that enabled effective performance in both personal and professional roles. The wardrobe selection for the evening carried symbolic significance that extended beyond normal celebration considerations. The emerald green dress that David complimented represented armor for battle rather than festive attire, while jewelry choices included pieces that would photograph well for media coverage that federal authorities anticipated following David's arrest and the exposure of his criminal network. The makeup and styling preparation involved creating an appearance that would convey strength and professionalism rather than vulnerability or surprise when David delivered his divorce announcement. The presentation needed to reflect someone prepared for confrontation rather than someone devastated by unexpected personal betrayal. The mental rehearsal process included visualization techniques that prepared me for various scenarios David might employ during his announcement, while ensuring that my response would effectively reveal his criminal exposure without compromising federal prosecution objectives. The preparation balanced personal vindication with professional responsibilities that supported broader law enforcement goals. The documentation review during morning hours provided final confirmation of evidence comprehensiveness, while ensuring that all materials were properly secured and accessible for federal prosecutors who would begin formal charging procedures immediately following David's arrest. The files represented months of systematic investigation while demonstrating capabilities that had established my credibility within federal law enforcement agencies. The communication protocols with federal coordinators ensured real-time information sharing about David's behavior and preparations, while providing mechanisms for emergency coordination if circumstances required modifications to arrest timing or procedures. The systems maintained operational security while enabling responsive adjustment to changing conditions. The business continuity preparation involved arrangements for managing Meridian Forensic Solutions operations during the immediate aftermath of David's arrest, when media attention and legal proceedings would create demands on my time and attention. Client service standards needed to be maintained while positioning the practice for expansion opportunities that would result from enhanced professional credibility. The legal coordination with federal attorneys provided final confirmation of prosecution strategies, while ensuring that my testimony and evidence presentation would support maximum charges against David and his criminal associates. The preparation included detailed discussion of courtroom procedures and cross-examination techniques that would test my professional credibility and technical expertise. The family notification planning required careful consideration of how relatives would learn about David's criminal activities and arrest, while managing their emotional responses and potential media interactions. The coordination balanced family privacy concerns with public disclosure requirements that would accompany high-profile white-collar crime prosecution. The financial preparation involved securing personal assets and income sources while ensuring that David's arrest and asset seizure procedures would not affect my independent financial security or business operations. The planning protected legitimate earnings while positioning me to benefit from enhanced professional reputation that would result from federal case publicity. The afternoon hours passed with surreal normalcy as David completed party preparation activities while remaining completely unaware that federal agents were finalizing arrest procedures and asset seizure operations that would destroy his freedom and financial security within hours of his planned divorce announcement. His confidence remained absolute despite subtle behavioral indicators that suggested subconscious awareness of potential exposure. The venue arrival procedures included final coordination with federal surveillance teams, who would monitor the evening's events while preparing for arrest execution that would occur after David's public humiliation attempt had been countered by revelation of his criminal activities. The timing required precise coordination that would maximize dramatic impact while preserving all evidence for prosecution purposes. The guest reception activities provided opportunities to observe attendee reactions and behavior patterns, while maintaining normal social interactions that concealed my knowledge of the evening's planned developments. The conversations required sophisticated emotional management that balanced genuine appreciation for friendship support with anticipation of their shocked responses to upcoming revelations. The dinner service proceeded with elegant efficiency that reflected David's attention to detail while creating the refined atmosphere he required for maximum impact during his announcement. The quality of food and service demonstrated his commitment to memorable experiences that would ensure guests remembered both celebration details and shocking personal disclosures. The wine service included premium selections that encouraged relaxed conversation while potentially reducing inhibitions that might prevent dramatic responses to David's planned announcement. The alcohol consumption patterns among guests provided useful intelligence about potential reactions to surprising developments, while creating atmosphere that would amplify emotional responses. The conversation monitoring during dinner revealed David's increasing confidence and anticipation as the moment for his announcement approached. His interactions with guests demonstrated satisfaction with event execution, while displaying arrogance about his perceived superior position in upcoming divorce proceedings that he believed would demonstrate his financial and social dominance. The timing coordination with federal authorities ensured that arrest procedures would begin immediately following my counter-revelation about David's criminal activities and imminent arrest. The precision required sophisticated operational planning that would capture maximum evidence while preventing destruction of materials or coordination between criminal network participants. The moment of truth was approaching, as David prepared to deliver his divorce announcement with theatrical confidence, completely unaware that his wife had spent months coordinating the federal investigation that would transform his moment of perceived triumph into public exposure of criminal activities that would destroy his freedom, reputation, and financial security permanently. The sequence of events that transformed my birthday celebration into the most dramatic confrontation of corporate fraud exposure in recent memory began precisely as David had choreographed, with his confident approach to the podium carrying the self-assured demeanor of someone convinced he held absolute strategic advantage. His theatrical presentation demonstrated months of planning while revealing psychological patterns that federal investigators would analyze extensively during subsequent prosecution preparation. The timing of David's announcement had been calculated to maximize emotional impact while creating social pressure that would force acceptance of his divorce terms without resistance or detailed examination of financial arrangements. His selection of my birthday celebration as the venue for public humiliation represented calculated cruelty, designed to associate this personal milestone permanently with devastating rejection and perceived inadequacy. The audience composition enhanced David's strategic positioning by including professional colleagues who respected his corporate success, family members who had invested emotional support in our marriage, and social acquaintances whose opinions carried weight within our community networks. The comprehensive attendance ensured maximum witnesses to his declaration, while creating conditions he believed would prevent dramatic counter-responses from someone he considered powerless and unprepared. The podium approach carried theatrical confidence that reflected David's certainty about the evening's trajectory and his complete absence of awareness regarding federal investigation activities that had documented his criminal behavior comprehensively over the preceding 18 months. His body language conveyed satisfaction with event execution, while displaying anticipation of delivering devastating news that would establish his dominance permanently. The speech introduction employed conventional celebration language that established normal expectations among guests who anticipated heartfelt tribute to marital partnership and personal milestone recognition. The preliminary remarks created emotional contrast that would amplify the shock value of his divorce announcement while demonstrating sophisticated understanding of psychological manipulation techniques. The transition toward revelation began with subtle verbal indicators that suggested departure from expected celebration themes, while building tension among guests who sensed shifting conversational direction without understanding the approaching devastation. The phrasing choices reflected legal consultation that had prepared David for potential challenges to his divorce strategy, while positioning his announcement as reasonable business decision rather than personal cruelty. The explicit divorce declaration delivered maximum emotional impact through clinical language that reduced our 15-year marriage to financial transaction requiring termination due to economic inefficiency. The characterization of me as financial burden demonstrated contempt that had been concealed throughout months of preparation while revealing psychological patterns that would support federal prosecution arguments about criminal motivation and character assessment. The audience reaction provided immediate validation of David's strategic calculation as guests experienced profound shock that rendered them temporarily speechless, while processing unprecedented violation of social conventions that govern appropriate behavior during celebratory gatherings. The silence that followed his announcement reflected collective discomfort with witnessing intimate personal destruction disguised as public information sharing. The psychological impact of public humiliation represented the culmination of David's strategic planning, while demonstrating his fundamental misunderstanding of my actual capabilities and preparation for this confrontation. His confidence remained absolute despite behavioral indicators that revealed subconscious awareness of potential exposure through mechanisms he could not consciously identify or understand. The transitional moment between David's announcement and my response provided crucial psychological preparation time that enabled effective delivery of information that would transform this evening from personal humiliation into comprehensive justice demonstration. The brief silence created dramatic tension that would amplify the impact of revealing David's criminal activities and imminent arrest. The decision to respond immediately rather than accepting humiliation reflected months of psychological preparation that had developed emotional resilience necessary for effective performance under extraordinary pressure. The strategic choice to counter his announcement with revelation of federal investigation represented careful calculation about optimal timing for maximum impact while supporting prosecution objectives. The professional authority demonstrated through my response reflected expertise and credibility that had been established through successful forensic consulting practice, while revealing capabilities that exceeded anything David had recognized during our marriage. The calm delivery indicated sophisticated emotional management that enabled effective communication despite personal stakes and psychological complexity of the situation. The revelation of Meridian Forensic Solutions represented the first indication to our guests that their understanding of my professional capabilities and financial circumstances had been fundamentally incorrect throughout the period of David's planning and preparation. The information challenged assumptions about my economic dependence while establishing credibility that would support subsequent revelations about federal investigation activities. The federal investigation disclosure provided comprehensive context for understanding how David's criminal activities had been discovered and documented, while revealing my central role in law enforcement coordination that had enabled successful prosecution preparation. The information transformed David's attempted humiliation into demonstration of his criminal exposure and vulnerability to justice proceedings. The specific criminal charges enumeration provided detailed understanding of embezzlement scope, while demonstrating the systematic nature of David's theft activities and sophisticated money laundering operations that had been comprehensively documented through months of federal investigation. The precision of information indicated thorough preparation, while establishing credibility that would support all subsequent revelations. The arrest warrant revelation delivered ultimate dramatic impact by confirming immediate consequences for David's criminal behavior, while demonstrating that justice proceedings would begin within hours, regardless of his personal preferences or strategic planning. The timing indicated sophisticated coordination between federal authorities and personal vindication objectives that had been balanced carefully throughout investigation processes. The transformation of David's expression from confident arrogance to shocked comprehension provided visual confirmation of complete strategic reversal, while demonstrating his absolute lack of awareness regarding federal investigation activities that had documented his crimes systematically. The psychological impact reflected fundamental misunderstanding of my capabilities, while revealing character weaknesses that would support prosecution arguments about criminal intent and moral culpability. The audience response to criminal revelation reflected profound shock that exceeded their initial reaction to divorce announcement, while processing information that challenged every assumption about David's character and our marriage dynamics. The collective silence indicated comprehensive reevaluation of evening events, while guests struggled to understand implications of criminal activities that had been concealed successfully throughout our social interactions. The power dynamic reversal represented complete vindication of federal investigation strategies, while demonstrating effective coordination between personal objectives and broader justice goals that would protect corporate integrity and public trust. The dramatic impact validated months of careful preparation, while providing psychological satisfaction that compensated for personal sacrifices required during investigation processes. The legal implications became immediately apparent, as guests processed information about criminal charges and arrest procedures, while understanding that David's corporate position and social standing would be destroyed permanently through federal prosecution activities. The comprehensive nature of charges indicated systematic criminal behavior that exceeded simple embezzlement to include sophisticated money laundering and conspiracy activities. The financial revelations challenged fundamental assumptions about our household economics, while demonstrating that David's criminal activities had funded lifestyle elements that I had attributed to legitimate corporate success. The information provided context for understanding how embezzled funds had supported expenses and investments that created false impressions of financial stability and professional achievement. The corporate fraud network exposure indicated broader implications that extended beyond individual criminal prosecution to include systematic corruption that affected multiple organizations and business relationships throughout the regional economy. The comprehensive scope demonstrated federal commitment to aggressive prosecution while providing deterrent effects that would discourage similar criminal enterprises. The international coordination aspects revealed sophisticated law enforcement cooperation that would prevent asset concealment or flight from prosecution, while ensuring maximum recovery of stolen funds for victim compensation. The global reach indicated resources and expertise that exceeded David's ability to escape accountability through traditional asset protection or jurisdictional manipulation strategies. The moment represented complete strategic triumph that validated every aspect of federal investigation planning, while demonstrating effective coordination between personal vindication and broader justice objectives that would protect corporate integrity and public trust throughout the business community. The profound silence that followed my revelation about David's criminal activities and impending arrest created a suspended moment where 120 guests processed information that fundamentally altered their understanding of everything they believed they knew about our marriage, David's character, and the financial circumstances that had defined our social interactions for years. The psychological impact extended far beyond immediate shock to include comprehensive reevaluation of assumptions, relationships, and judgments that would affect these individuals permanently. The transformation in David's physical appearance provided visible confirmation of complete strategic collapse, as his confident posture dissolved into someone who recognized that his carefully constructed criminal enterprise had been exposed comprehensively by the person he had most underestimated. His face cycled through expressions of disbelief, comprehension, and desperate calculation, as he processed the implications of federal prosecution while understanding that his exit strategy had been transformed into evidence of criminal intent. The guest reactions varied according to their relationships with us and their professional understanding of criminal justice procedures, but the universal element involved fundamental reassessment of David's character, while recognizing that his corporate success had been built partially on stolen funds rather than legitimate achievement. The realization created cognitive dissonance that would require extensive processing as individuals reconciled their previous admiration with current knowledge of systematic criminal behavior. The family members present struggled with emotional complexity that involved personal betrayal, social embarrassment, and practical concerns about legal implications that would affect their relationships with both David and me throughout the prosecution process. Their responses reflected the particular pain of discovering that someone they had trusted and celebrated had been engaged in sophisticated criminal activities while maintaining normal family interactions. The professional colleagues displayed reactions that encompassed career implications, corporate security concerns, and regulatory compliance considerations that would affect their own employment circumstances, as federal investigators examined potential connections between David's criminal activities and their organizations. Their shock included professional calculations about association risks and potential investigative scrutiny that might affect their careers. The social acquaintances experienced the uncomfortable recognition that their community had harbored criminal activities without detection, while their social gatherings had provided cover for someone engaged in systematic theft and money laundering operations. The revelation challenged their confidence in social judgment while creating anxiety about potential law enforcement attention to their financial activities. The immediate practical consequences began materializing as guests processed implications of attending a celebration that had become a crime scene where federal evidence had been presented publicly, while criminal conduct had been documented through witness testimony that would support prosecution proceedings. Their presence connected them to federal investigation activities in ways that would require legal consultation and potential cooperation with law enforcement agencies. The venue management faced unprecedented circumstances as their elegant celebration space became the setting for public exposure of criminal activities that would generate media attention and legal scrutiny affecting their reputation and business operations. The situation required immediate coordination with law enforcement authorities while managing guest safety and facility security during potential arrest procedures. The catering staff observed developments that exceeded their experience with difficult social situations, while recognizing that their service would be associated permanently with one of the region's most dramatic white-collar crime exposures. Their professional obligations required continuing service excellence, while managing personal reactions to extraordinary circumstances that would become part of legal proceedings. The security implications expanded beyond immediate venue concerns to include federal coordination requirements that would transform the location into temporary law enforcement headquarters for arrest execution and evidence preservation activities. The transition required sophisticated operational planning that balanced guest safety with investigative objectives while maintaining comprehensive documentation of all relevant activities. The media considerations became immediately relevant as information about corporate fraud exposure began circulating among guests who recognized the news value of dramatic criminal revelation at social gathering. The potential for unauthorized disclosure required careful management that balanced public information interests with federal prosecution requirements for controlled evidence release. The legal ramifications extended beyond David's individual criminal exposure to include civil liability implications for corporate victims, potential asset recovery procedures affecting joint marital property, and regulatory compliance requirements that would affect our financial institutions and professional relationships. The comprehensive scope demanded immediate legal consultation while protecting legitimate interests from criminal asset forfeiture procedures. The corporate implications for Hartwell Industries included immediate notification requirements for shareholders, regulatory agencies, and law enforcement authorities, while implementing emergency financial controls that would prevent additional theft and preserve evidence for federal investigation. The company faced potential liability exposure while managing public relations challenges that would affect their business operations and competitive position. The professional implications for my forensic consulting practice included immediate enhancement of credibility and reputation within law enforcement agencies, while creating opportunities for expanded client relationships and increased engagement complexity. The public validation of investigative capabilities would generate referral opportunities while establishing expertise recognition that would support premium fee structures. The financial implications involved immediate separation of legitimate assets from potentially criminal proceeds, while ensuring that federal asset forfeiture procedures would not affect income sources or business operations that had been developed independently of David's criminal activities. The protection required sophisticated legal coordination while maintaining full cooperation with federal investigation requirements. The social implications extended throughout our community networks as friends, neighbors, and professional associates processed information about criminal activities that had been concealed during normal social interactions. The revelation would affect party invitations, business relationships, and community activities while creating ongoing conversation topics that would persist throughout prosecution proceedings. The psychological implications for me included validation of investigation efforts and professional competence, while providing emotional satisfaction that compensated for personal betrayal and deception endured during months of marriage to someone engaged in systematic criminal behavior. The vindication supported continued business development, while confirming that federal cooperation had been morally necessary and professionally beneficial. The investigation implications included immediate transition from covert intelligence gathering to public cooperation with federal authorities who would require continued expert assistance during prosecution preparation and potential trial proceedings. The relationship evolution would enhance professional credibility while providing access to advanced training and case coordination opportunities that would support long-term career development. The prosecution implications involved comprehensive evidence compilation that would support federal charges while ensuring that testimony and expert analysis would contribute to successful conviction of David and potential co-conspirators, identified through network investigation activities. The preparation required sophisticated coordination between personal knowledge and professional expertise, while maintaining objectivity that would satisfy aggressive cross-examination by defense attorneys. The asset recovery implications included coordination with federal authorities, who would trace and seize criminal proceeds, while ensuring that legitimate marital property would be protected from forfeiture procedures that targeted funds derived from illegal activities. The separation required detailed financial analysis that would distinguish between stolen funds and income sources that had been earned through legitimate professional activities. The deterrent implications of public exposure would affect potential white-collar criminals throughout the business community, while demonstrating federal commitment to aggressive prosecution of corporate fraud regardless of social position or professional reputation. The demonstration effect would strengthen corporate compliance programs while encouraging reporting of suspicious financial activities that might indicate systematic theft operations. The educational implications included case study development that would support training programs for law enforcement investigators, corporate security professionals, and forensic accounting specialists who needed understanding of sophisticated criminal methodologies and detection techniques. The academic value would extend prosecution benefits to include systemic improvements in fraud prevention and investigation capabilities. The community implications involved restoration of public trust in corporate integrity, while demonstrating that criminal activities would be discovered and prosecuted regardless of sophistication or social camouflage employed by offenders. The outcome would strengthen business community confidence, while encouraging voluntary compliance with financial regulations and ethical business practices. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.